Hi, this is Chris Cox. You know me as Hawkeye, I never miss, from Earth's Mightiest Heroes. You are listening to Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hello, Mr. Cox. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to speak with you, sir. I'm a big fan of yours, so thank you for coming on my show.
Yeah.
So we start with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love of acting and who your earliest influences?
Well, it's a couple different influences, kind of from different time periods. When I was very young, my parents were older, so I was kind of exposed to kind of like a generation before me, and all the stuff they were exposed to, because my parents just would play things and talk about things. So W.C. Fields, Laurel and Hardy, the Three Stooges, and those are things that I could watch anyway. But this the extra sort of support, I guess, or background of my parents being from that generation, really liked. And my dad loved that, I could do impressions as a young kid. I was doing W.C. Fields, my little chickadee and all this kind of. So that was that. But then once I became sort of more cognizant of my actual age, Eddie Murphy was a huge influence. I just lived and died every Monday after a Saturday Night Live aired. I would come to school, and me and then two other guys, Byron and Malcolm, shout out wherever they are. We would all do dueling impressions and talk about it, when I was in elementary school. And then finally, a huge influence was David Letterman, who happens to be from my place of birth, Indiana. And he went to college in the town I was born in called Muncie. So, yeah, always loved him.
So you've had this amazing voice career. Where did these skills come from? How did you develop them further over time?
So, again, referencing back to those early influences, from the time I was a kid, I just had this innate ability to do impressions. And I would imitate the neighbor who was from Mississippi. So he had a Southern accent, which I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew he had something, he had handles. When you're doing impressions, you look for what I call handles, things to grab onto vocally. And he was like, well, I just, hanging out here, and we're going to do work on the yard tomorrow and whatever. And so when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I just kind of like a parrot, I guess, like it just kind of went one in here. And one day I'm doing that voice, and my parents are like, oh my God, that's Mr. Moore. Then they were like, we can't have him do that around Mr. Moore. So that was really where I started it. And then as I got older and older, I would, again, watch SNL. I would imitate their imitations. So if, Martin Short was doing a character like Jackie Rogers Jr., Daddy, sir, all of these things, hey, Grimmy, oh my gosh, all of those things. I would just imitate those, and it just kind of, as you get older and you're doing more and more of those, you get better. It's just, that's my 10,000 hours. It's just doing what.
So can you kind of discuss a little bit more what you mean by handles?
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll give you an example of a current impression from the last few years that I've done.
Okay.
So one of the impressions I do is it's Rudy Giuliani. And the thing about Rudy Giuliani is the handle is right here. Now, it's not that different from suffering succotash. It's one right here. And what it is you don't actually close your teeth. You leave your lips a little open. You push the air through. And you, of course, add a little bit of a New York accent. And that's the handle. That is how I knew. As soon as I started watching, and sometimes you can visually watch someone. I really study their mouth and the way they move their mouths. And it really informs the sound, like Matthew McConaughey keeps his mouth wide open, just like that. And he doesn't really have it. What I say with him is he actually has handles, but with his own way of talking, he's not hitting very much. It kind of flows out. There's not a lot of, it's not bumping around, if you know what I mean. It's a straight shot. A lot of people, oh, Wilson's like chewing and all this stuff. Matthew McConaughey is just straight out into the universe, just keeps it clean. And so that's his handle, just a clean delivery. And then, and actually, I actually do, later on, I started to understand how to do David Letterman. And, folks, here's the deal. The way you do Dave is you just, you kind of, and you kind of keep it in the back of your throat and you just, you put that laugh in, and that's the handle on him. So there's just these different funny things you grab onto, little pieces. And, that's enough. People, when they appreciate an impression, usually they're appreciating how you're catching something that they recognize, and you're exaggerating it,
So
I could not imitate myself. I don't have any handles. I don't know. There are people that could imitate me quite well, but I don't know who they are. But I don't consider myself vocally to have that many handles, which in a weird way helps me do other people, because I kind of have a blank canvas that I can project out on.
So when you do all these impressions, how much of this is just like good old genetic, you're able to do something with your voice, and how much is it a conscious decision to do this or that with your vocal cords?
That is a great question. Mimicry is part, it's vocal, obviously, but it's really a big part of it is hearing and the ear. And you're just catching things, that are going in there, and your brain kind of processes it. And then it's the translation of what you're hearing into the structure that you have to create. That I don't know. I do think that on some level that is just, I do think you're kind of born with that on some, because here's what I'll say. A lot of people who are musicians, okay, and then a lot of comedians who do impressions. Comedians who do impressions can play instruments, and they're good with music. They have timing and rhythm. Dana Carvey is a great drummer. And then there'll be singers. I can't think off the top of my head right now. I know there are some singers who do great impression. Well, Ariana Grande, actually, she was on SNL. I didn't know. She was incredible. She did impressions of other singers. So there's something about the, hearing it and then being able to take that and change it into, kind of an exported product, if you will. And that's kind of it.
So when you're thinking about doing a certain impression, okay, are you looking for a voice that is similar to ones you've done before or your own? Or are you able to just look at a voice and go, I want to try that? Or he has a handle that you latch on to? And how long does it take you from making the decision to being successful with the impression?
Pardon me while I do an impression of an old guy who has to clean it. Well, I tell you, back in my day, back in the late 70s and early 80s, okay, I'll give you an example. So I do this this podcast with I'm a guest on a podcast called The Cheap Seats, A View from the Cheap Seats, with these comedians called the Sklar's. They're twins, and they're stand-up comedians. So I've been working with them for like a decade. It's just, I know Randy happens to live in my neighborhood. I've known him for many years. Ironically, he moved into the apartment that my wife, when she lived in New York, lived in. So there's this kind of connectivity. And, long time ago, right as they were starting the podcast, we were hanging out, and I started doing my Sam Elliott. And I just said, hey, Randy, how you doing? How's it hanging? Whatever. And he was like, what? And at that time, nobody did a Sam Elliott. Like, I had never seen anybody do a Sam Elliott. I was a huge Sam Elliott fan. He had handles. In case his handles it's a nasal quality. Back in the back of your nose, the cavity. You just kind of push everything up there. You don't open your mouth that much because you don't need to. You got all this power in your voice, Only you can prevent forest fires. So he was that guy. He was the voice of the. So when I did that show, it was a sports related. It's a sports related show. So I said, I think I could do Tiger Woods. I just kind of had this weird feeling because I'd watched Tiger. I was, kind of a golf fan, and I'd watched him, and I never saw anybody do that. But I just noticed that one of the things that he does is that his handles, he kind of keeps his mouth open, and he does a lot of talks about winning the Masters and other tournaments, and And so what I did was, okay, I didn't have it at the beginning, but I could hear. I was like, I can grab that, but that's going to be tough. And I told Randy, I said, this will be fun. I've never done this. I said, for the next week while I work on this, I'm going to call you every day. We'll talk for like 5 minutes. That'll be it, whatever. And I'm going to give you, I want you to be able to see my process. And it was crazy. And he did. He saw the building blocks. And like on the third day, he's like, it's getting closer. I go, yeah, right. By 5 days, man, I called him up the 50. He's like, bing, 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 bing. He's like, you got it. And so, you know, that's kind of, if you have one that you want to figure out, you can focus on it and just work it and work it and work it. And you'll listen to it in my car and I'll be like, you know, okay, that's what they do there. Oh, that's a good word to cue off of. That certain word, you know, that was it for me. What Tiger was he just says a lot of and that kind of, you know, kept the rhythm of it, you know, and he talks about Brooks Koepka. That's an offer. I used to mention Jim Furyk a lot. That was a while back when Jim Furyk was bigger. But yeah, that was an example of how I didn't have a voice, but I worked on it rather than it sort of coming naturally. I really had to kind of just chug along.
Now you did the voice for George W. Bush on American Dad. Is that correct?
I think I did it on Family. I did it on Family Guy. I may have done it. You know, here's the problem. I've done for many years. I've worked on both shows. More on I did Obama for American Dad for sure. And that's a funny story how I got Obama. That was another funny one. I knew when Obama was gaining steam, and I was glad because I knew I couldn't do Hillary. So I was like, I'm going to be out of work if Hillary gets in there. And one of my things I pride myself is I have made money. I have gotten hired to do every president in some capacity, every president starting with JFK except LBJ, everyone. And I love that. Like, I love that that's this weird little, you know, niche that I have, as I've got that. So with Obama, again, not exactly natural for me. It didn't come to me right away. But I realized he had kind of this, what I would call is almost it was bordering on a stammer, you know. But he was careful with his words and he took time. So I worked on that. And one day during a Family Guy session, Seth was directing me, MacFarlane, also a Rhode Islander. And I just said, so you got an Obama yet? You know, has anybody doing Obama? And I had enough of a relationship. You know, I didn't mess around. One of the things with Seth was, you know, I just went in there. I wanted to do a great job and get out of his hair. He had a lot going on. He didn't need me yucking it up. We'd have a few fun exchanges, but I was just like, okay, because, you know, there would be like a cavalcade of people waiting, you know, in the waiting room. People you would just see like, oh, there's Adam West. Oh, hi, Adam, you know, crazy. Oh, there's Frank Sinatra Jr., you know. So I did. He said, no, we don't have an Obama. Do you? Because it literally was probably right after he was elected. And he said, do you do one? And I just was like, yeah. And I did it. And he was like, all right. And then the next thing I know, I was, you know, one of the main guest stars on an episode of American Dad. Incident at Owl Creek, I think is what it's called.
That's cool.
But yeah, I did play George Bush. I played George Bush also on Family Guy. And a funny story about that is that, you know, it was actually Rush Limbaugh and I were, you know, acting, and, you know, I never got to meet him or whatever, but, you know, he was he was able, I guess, to make fun of himself. Seth told me when he came in, he's a good-natured, good sport. And, you know, it was, that was a fun one to do because I got to play with Uncle Rush.
Now, is it easier to do an impression for voice acting or create a voice such as with characters like Hawkeye?
You know, I sometimes you use an impression to you'll sort of, a lot of characters, you know, not always, but you'll have some element of an actor, or, you know, something you're weaning off of another character, or impersonation. And sometimes no, sometimes it's just your voice. I mean, listen, one of the misnomers about voice acting is people just think, hey, I can do voices, so I should be a voice actor.
Mm.
And hey, go for it. That's cool. Everybody who's a voice actor can do voices. But the other important thing they can do is they can act.
Mm.
And it's much more about the acting. The facility for doing voices is great. It's been a big help for me. But if I couldn't act, I wouldn't have gotten any of the parts. So Hawkeye is a great example. I went on Hawkeye. I went in for Iron Man. And I went in with a Robert Downey Jr.-esque, sort of like, hey, Cap, what's going on? It's sort of Robert Downey Jr. thing. Just, yeah, really trying to figure this out. But anyway, Pepper, that's all right. Okay. Jarvis, that kind of thing. And I thought, I should be, so I'll be in the mix. I thought I had a pretty decent take. And that's what they wanted was they did want somebody vocally close on that character.
Mm.
And so I did that. And the casting people, they sort of I looked through the glass, and they were kind of talking, and you can't hear them. They're like, and I was like, that's interesting. And then they push on the button. They go up. How would you feel about reading for Hawkeye? No. What are you, crazy? So I said, of course. And I had not had I didn't have any preparation for it, So they brought the sides in, gave me, a minute just to look at them so I could absorb it. And as soon as I read it, I knew what they were getting at. I knew why they wanted me to read for it, because even in Iron Man and Hawkeye have some. Oops, my computer just went. Iron Man and Hawkeye have some crossover. They both are sort of smart alecks, and so they were keying off of that. But I think they thought there was something else in me that would fit more with Hawkeye. So I did it. I did the audition. And I think what really got me the part was, did the lines, and then it's tick, tick, boom. I mean, the way that I delivered it, I could just tell they were, and you don't often have that feeling where you're like, oh man, I got it. You say like, you can think, oh, I nailed it, I did well. Usually if you think you did really well, that's the kiss of death. You don't get, it's always when you think, oh man, I really screwed that up. And then you'll get that. But this one, I just knew their energy and that character. I mean, I immediately, man, that character and I were just like fused, and I felt it. And then we started doing the series, and I just fell into it even more. It was fantastic. It was an amazing experience. Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
I'm gonna say it's one of my favorite cartoon series that have ever been made. I mean, obviously, for Batman animated series, definitely my favorite. But Avengers: Earth Mightiest Heroes is such a wonderful done series. It captures the characters so well. I mean, I wish it had more seasons than it got.
You and me both, man. I gotta tell you, and I was always I wasn't a comic book person, but I was a superhero kid from the beginning. So it was the stuff on TV and movies. I mean, Superman with Christopher Reeve, that was it. I mean, that was it. And even obscure things, like there was a Spider-Man series on CBS when I was very young. I mean, you'd have to like look it up. But it was a TV, he was climbing on like the World Trade Center, I think. And I was riveted, so I always loved superhero movies and TV shows. But when I did this and I got a little more, I did some background reading and on the comics, and I thought, man, they are really sticking to the real seed of what this is. And the writing was so good. I'm also a writer, and as a writer, every script I was like, are you kidding? They're tight. That's what you say when something is just like not a word wasted. Everything pushed the story forward. There was emotion, there was humor. Chris Yost, at one point, who went on to, do Thor, and he was one of the writer producers, and he took me aside and he's like, hey, we're really loving this, what you're bringing with this character. And, we feel like we're finding, because we're now, when we're writing
your character within the scripts. We have your voice, your version of Hawkeye. We know it now. And I was like, yeah, no, I can tell. The scripts kind of, they just massaged it into this beautiful like combo of me and Hawkeye. So it was wonderful. I agree with you. It was just so well done, and we all wish that it had gone on.
I mean, especially with Hawkeye, I think more than the movies, they captured the character better in the series than the movies have ever done it. And that's a hell of a thing, consider how successful those are.
No, I mean, thank you. I mean, thank you for them, and thank you for me, because I had something to do with it, but I won't take all the credit. It was a team effort, but I think it's probably on behalf of all of the Hawkeyes, I will just refrain from from weighing in too heavily. But what I will say is, again, what they did with all of the characters in that series is just to be commended. And I think, I still get fan mail for that show. I get fan mail for various things, but that show had an impact on people who are now coming of age. They were young kids, because it started 13 years ago or something. So now, they're graduating from college or whatever, and they'll send me these letters, and they have such affection for the show and for my character. And it's really, it's disarming and it's touching. I love it, and my daughters, they are so into it because they like to read the letters. Like I got one the other day, and it was clearly from like a young kid,
Yeah.
And my daughter was like, "Oh, he's got to be like 8. Look, his handwriting." She's like, "Dad, you got to sign it and get it out now." I was like, "Okay."
well, I will say I was 30 when it came out, and I still loved it.
Hey, man, believe me, I get it, man. That was the other great thing about it. It was not childish. It didn't talk down to young kids, and it was elevated enough that that older people could watch it. I mean, when I would watch them, there's this part of you that you're watching it and going, okay, I did okay there and whatever, but I would get sucked in to the stories and the acting. I mean, just tremendous acting all across the board. I mean, Rick Wasserman, Brian Bloom, Colleen O'Shaughnessy. I mean, it was just an incredible cast. Brent Hatteser, obviously, as Hulk. That was something to see. Being in a room where he was, I had never seen anything like that. It was, and he and our characters had such a fun relationship. And Fred and I were friends, and so we were able to play off each other and such. So they would write to that. They would have these Hawkeye, Hulk little vignettes where we would have our, square off and wisecrack with each other. It was funny.
Well, like I said, Rick Wasserman is a friend of the show. He was on it, I think, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, and he's awesome too. And I remember him talking as well about how great it was to have everyone in the same room able to perform and watching each other do their thing.
It was vital to the lifeblood of that show. I mean, it really makes, in my opinion, it makes a difference. Now, a show like Family Guy, what's funny about Family Guy is because Seth does he does like so many of the voices. In a weird way, he's a self ensemble. So he is in a room. He's in a room with himself. But that show's just a different beast. I mean, it works fantastic. You don't need, and like The Simpsons. So I'm not saying that it can't be done. Of course it can be done. But there's something about it, especially when you're playing a superhero group, when you're in that room. I mean, Brian Bloom, when he would do, Captain America, he would do that voice, that baritone sort of, commanding voice. I mean, you wanted to step up for Cap, and when Fred is just shredding, well, for me, it would be shredding. For Fred, I just think it's fretting. His chords to do Hulk, you're like, well, if he's going that hard, he's putting let's all put our all in. Don't slack. And And I got to say, just the last thing about Rick, I think I can say this because it's not about me. For my money, and I love Chris Hemsworth, but man, Rick's Thor was just like, are you kidding me? Like that was Thor. I mean, I was like, I'm standing next to Thor, and he's about my height, maybe a little shorter, but his voice, that barrel chested, bravado, and he had this Shakespearean, because he was a theater actor, where he comes from that, and so he brought such a like gravitas, and yeah, he was incredible.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of his Thor. I don't like Christopher Hemsworth. You got the sense when you heard the Thor of Rick's Thor that he was 1,000-year-old alien Prince of Thunder, which Hemsworth is great, but he still seems like just like a tough guy playing Thor. But Rick felt like you could hear the age and experience and royalty of Thor.
You're right. There was not a contemporary, not a scintilla on some level of contemporary vibe going on now, and that's what always makes it funny too, is that when there is a introduction of something contemporary, which there would be at times, to see his reaction to that sort of thing makes it even better, because you really believe this guy just came from another dimension, another time. He's just not of our era, and so that really helped. Yeah, I agree.
Now, as you said, Rick had the Shakespearean background. For you, from an acting standpoint, where did your background in acting come from?
So, in high school, I did, well, even in elementary, I did like the talent show, when I was very, very young. I was a huge fan of the Robin Williams Popeye movie. I think I'm one of only a few. It didn't do very well, but I found it charming and oddly hypnotizing. And so I pantomimed to the song and for the talent show. And that was my first, showbiz experience. And I got the bug, did some plays moving through elementary, junior high. When I came out here, I did the Groundlings. I went through the Groundlings program, and that was really fun, and really just kind of opened me up to the possibilities of performing on a higher level, because you're, even in the classes, once you start ratcheting up to the higher levels, you got some real talent in there, and it forces you to step up your game. And so that's where, some of that came from. Yeah.
Now, go back a bit to the Avengers. As you mentioned, the great chemistry you had with Fred, who played the Hulk. In the Hawkeye Hulk thing, they really started playing up after that first introduction with each other. Why do you think those characters work so well together? And do you think the plan was always to have them be this great pairing, or did that just come out of how well you guys did playing off each other?
I think it was a combination of things, but I think, one of the things that I identified with Hawkeye is that, he was an outsider. I think everyone can identify with that to some degree. I mean, we all feel like, but I really got it. And he was an outsider from the Midwest, which is where I'm originally from. And so, and he's coming into here. And I think I had the way that I came at it was, and the writing kind of played to this, was that he was sort of like, well, he would say like, I just saved the world for your butts. You're welcome. That kind of thing. He wanted to prove himself. There was insecurity underneath it. I always wanted that to be there. But then I also, I felt that he was being sort of almost one of the most mortal of them all, with only his arrow and his bows, that he had to have a grit and a determination and kind of like an endurance. Like I was a long distance runner, so I probably had some sense of that too. And so that was him, right? The Hulk, Hulk is alienated. Again, I watched The Incredible Hulk every week with Bill Bixby. I was like, just glued to it. Probably saw every episode 2 or 3 times when they replay it. And he, at the end of every episode, right? He's the backpack. you know, and so there was a loner aspect to him, and so I think for me, Hulk, there's Banner's still in there, obviously overtaken by his physicality and the mental changes as well, but he's still in there, and I felt like Hulk and Hawkeye kind of saw something in each other that was a kindred spirit. They both kind of had this. They were both alienated in some ways, maybe a bit misanthropic. I don't know. But they also, I think Hulk really in our series, I think there's a moment when I sort of say, bottom line, you're going down, and I'm saying it to this, gigantic, whatever, 15-foot tall, massive character. And he just goes, he laughs at me. But I never felt that laugh was like, was sort of a caustic, like you. I felt like I thought he was like, actually kind of humored by it and tickled by it, and kind of was like, oh, who's this guy? What's that about? I always felt that from that exchange, and that's what we built off of, was this sort of mutual admiration. That's kind of what I think happened there. Was that too much? I don't know. Did I put too much?
No, I thought that was, I mean, it was such a good characterization, and I think they're one of the best aspects of the show. It was those interactions, and I mean, a lot of them had to do, or had around the Thor and Hulk relationship was really cool, but Hawkeye and Hulk, it was something kind of special about it. And when they played it up, you thought to yourself, this really does work well. You have in many ways the weakest Avenger and the strongest Avenger, and how they buddied up like that it really was so cool.
That's a brilliant assessment. You're so smart. Be dumb, you smarter. That's actually that's actually very astute. Yeah, Hawkeye, he was sort of the least powerful in the traditional sense. I mean, he obviously had acrobatics and all of that stuff, which I loved. I loved all the things they did with that character in that series that really made him. And the movies, I don't think it they had so much going on. The movies had so many people to answer to, so many characters to service, and Jeremy Renner was incredible. But it's like in the animated version, they were able to use animation to kind of heighten his abilities in terms of the acrobatics and the physicality, and it just really made you go, okay, yeah, I buy it. I buy that this guy's part of that team and that they need him, and that there are times when only he can do things that, with all of their powers and everything else, he has a caginess and a street wisdom that kind of was made him, useful. And so, yeah.
I think were they fighting? I think the Kree, and and the only way to save the universe, him firing and the weapons into this super portal. And so I was like, that is some badass stuff for Hawkeye. and you can just figure. I can almost my head picture Jeremy Renner watching, going, motherfucker, I wish I had the opportunity to do something like that.
I remember. I don't recall what episode this was, but I remember we were up in it's a great shot too. We're up in the rafters, Hawk and I, and we're just looking down over the melee, and so we're not really helping our fellow Avengers. We're gonna go and help them, but we're enjoying them fighting and the scrapping, and we're just both sitting there, almost like the two guys. What are their names in the Muppet Show?
All those film critics. I know what you're talking about.
The guys that sit up there and they're like, Wilford and whatever. I don't remember their names. It's terrible. I don't remember their names, but it was like that. It was like we were up there in the balcony just watching them and having a good old time with ourselves. And that was, that was kind of it's like our Stand By Me moment,
Right. and I think another thing that I kind of wish they developed more. There's a Hawkeye and Black Widow. I felt like they hinted at the history, but they never spent the time and actually got there and made it happen.
Yeah, so, I wonder if the next season might have brought that if we had another season, because I agree. We definitely touched on it. Vanessa Marshall and I, we had some of those moments, but yeah, it never really built up to the next level.
Were there whispers of a third season that was going to happen?
it was really strange. What I don't really have, I don't have any insider information, but it was right around the time when they were. I mean, we came before the movie, and it's my guess, just sort of seeing what happened with the next series that came after us, that they were trying to get some alignment with the feature film.
Yeah.
The feature film was establishing itself, and I mean, Marvel's brilliant. They know how to line things up. I mean, and so I think that I think that they were probably looking at us at that point and going, well, how does this line up with what we're doing with the movies? Because what they did was I mean, what we did was such a faithful thing to the comic books. And I think that what they did with the feature version of Avengers was a sort of a different beast. I mean, it was a great beast. I mean, look, it's an incredible series of movies. I mean, they're fantastic, all of them. I love them. But yeah, I think that once that started coming into focus, I think we just fell by the wayside. There was never any official kind of like, sometimes things just go away, and it just kind of went away. And it was sad because I did feel, I felt like we had at least another season or maybe two to really explore things like you're talking about. And I don't know anything about the fan base, the ratings. I'm not privy to any of that. So yeah, any number of factors could have been part of the decision, but
it really was such a shame because
don't blame that shit on me, man. Don't blame that shit on me. Hawkeye was ready.
It wasn't you. You didn't take them all down. like I think I just read earlier. God, what was, I don't know the guy's name from Big Bang Theory, who played Sheldon, who decided to basically shut down the series. So it wasn't you who did like a Sheldon. It was like, I'm done with this series, and there's no series of Hawkeye. This is going down.
Right? Yeah. No. Yeah. I've had it. Listen, fellow friends, Courtney and Lisa Kudrow and Matt LeBlanc.
So I mean, it really was a shame because I really do think that series was better than the one that came after. And it did such. And part of me was wondering, like, was there a problem that it did the movies better than the movies did? Because like the Ultron episodes and all that stuff, they were better. They did a better job with them. But one was like, just kill the damn thing.
Oh God, the Ultron. Yeah, the Ultron. Oh man. Oh God, who played Ultron? Oh, see, it's been too long. I can't remember who played Ultron. It's like I can almost remember. I'm so close to remember. Sorry if you're out there watching Ultron, actor who played Ultron. Yeah, I can't remember. I do remember we had Lance. I loved our guest stars. We had great guest stars. Lance Henriksen of Aliens fame. He was, Bishop.
Yeah.
Oh, the irony of this is I just remembered I was Seth MacFarlane was kind enough to give me a little cameo in the movie Ted. And if you've seen it, there's a scene where they do the Bishop. It's the Ted the bear does the knife stabbing on a guy, and I'm like that guy's friend, and we're talking, and I convince him because he's like, I don't think I should do that. I'm like, no, man, it's all good. Then he stabs him in the hand. Little aside, yeah. So next time you watch Ted, just for about 5 seconds, you'll see me one line. But that was awesome because they had Flash was there. He was actually in the movie, the guy that played the original or Flash Gordon. So anyway, going back to Lance Henriksen, he was awesome. I mean, he would do his lines, and after his lines, he would laugh, and it was such a genuine thing. Sometimes actors that are more from TV or film, they don't necessarily have they have the chops, but it's just a different experience. And so he seemed to be, for whatever reason, he was very tickled. I've used that word twice. Sorry. He was, he was very pleased about these things. He wasn't being like, oh, I did a great job. He just would laugh. So he'd be like, they would call cut and he would just laugh. And and I was like so charmed by it because this is a guy that played a character that was legendary in my childhood, and suddenly he was also in Close Encounters. He was the guy that puts the glasses on and looks up at the end when the alien ship door opens up and they're all looking up there. He was a famous shot of him, and he was also in The Right Stuff, which is a great movie. So it's fun when you get to meet people that you've looked up to, and then they're nice and fun. He was really nice. Also drove the world's biggest truck. I remember after the set going out back, I was like, hey, Lance. He was like sitting up in the air.
It just was fantastic, and I think I was one of those people who do wish it. I mean, I must admit, but I'm also the nerd who has the opening theme on my iTunes. I had it playing for night.
Oh my god! Look, you know what's funny? Because I come from a background of writing and also editing. When I first came to LA, I was I said a lot of people were actor waiters. I was an actor editor. I had the skill from college. I knew how to do it, and I knew how to work in Avid, which was the industry standard editing machine. And so I really appreciate things, the way music and all that. So they brought us the first edit of the opening, and we had already recorded, I think, a few episodes, whatever it was, and they had still been working. So they showed us, and I remember seeing that opening with the music, and I was like, oh man, that's hot. That's good stuff. I mean, really, really fun.
It was, I mean, the part that drove me crazy is that for years they didn't have it on iTunes at all, so you couldn't find the song. I think it was only like 8 months ago that I was like, I want to find the song again, god damn it! And I found it, I was like, holy shit! And it's, honest to God, it's on my iTunes, and I can remember the last time I played it. It wasn't that long ago. It was like probably a week ago. I'm listening in my car.
I had to, when I was putting together, this is some years ago, I was putting together a reel. I was, for my different things. Which you can see if you go to Chris Cox Vox on YouTube, I think is on there. My Chris Cox animation reel. I was lucky that I had recorded those episodes because they were not available. You're right. So I had them. And so I was able to, take various scenes that I thought would be fun, and I, would put them on my reel. But it was fun going back.
Right. Now, I mean, are you doing the convention circuits? Have you had like fan reactions from the series people coming to you?
I haven't done the convention circuit. I've talked about it. Friends and I have talked about it. I haven't really committed to that. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm a shy Midwestern guy. I'm like, people really want to. I get the fan mail, so I know there are some, but I don't want to be the guy at the table that's looking around going, hey, anybody want to Hawkeye? Get your Hawkeye over here. Then Hawkeye. I got one Hawkeye.
Well, all I'm saying for anyone who's listening, they're making X-Men 97 right now for Disney. So I think it's time for Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes 2013. I think it's time for that, so they better get to work.
Yeah, it's nice. I love it.